You know that moment when someone pulls back the curtain and just says what everyone's been thinking, but no one's had the guts to say out loud? That's what just happened when Cam Ward, rising NFL quarterback and certified truth teller of the moment, went off script and got real about his so-called rival, Shedeur Sanders. And spoiler alert, it's not the rivalry the media wants you to believe in. In fact, this entire narrative? Yeah, it's been built on vibes, clickbait, and a total misunderstanding of what's actually going on between these two athletes. Let's rewind. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Because if you've been living under a sports rock or you just blinked at the wrong time during draft season, you might have missed a bizarrely persistent story floating around. Cam Ward versus Shedeur Sanders. Two talented, young black quarterbacks from smaller schools, both with big arms, big personalities, and big futures. It had to be a rivalry, right? That's what the media thought. The drama practically wrote itself. They were packaged as foils: Ward, the underdog gunslinger with chip on his shoulder, and Sanders, the flashy, media-savvy QB with a famous last name and a million eyeballs watching his every move. The storylines practically screamed, who will be the next big thing? Who's the real star? But here's the truth, the real unfiltered, from the source truth that just shook up the NFL fandom like a locker room fight gone viral. There is no rivalry. There never was. At least, not the kind the media wanted. Because according to Cam Ward, this isn't a showdown. It's a brotherhood. And honestly, that changes everything. When Ward finally spoke up, it wasn't with PR polish or passive-aggressive shade. It was with clarity, conviction, and a whole lot of frustration at how the narrative had been twisted. From the outside, fans were being sold a clash of egos, but behind the scenes, these two had been training together, encouraging each other, texting advice, and pushing one another to level up. They even share the same quarterback coach. Like, literally the same guy. So how exactly are you going to spin that into a blood feud? But you know how this works. Sports media loves a rivalry. It sells. Conflict grabs attention. Brotherhood? Not so much. Especially when both players are thriving in a league that historically hasn't exactly rolled out the red carpet for quarterbacks who don't fit the traditional mold, or don't come from an SEC dynasty. Now, Cam could have just kept it moving. He could have let the media stir the pot and cashed in on the drama. But instead, he did something way rarer. He defended Shedeur. Openly, fiercely, and let's just say he didn't hold back. Because Shedeur Sanders, no matter what you think of his social media presence or his last name or his famous father, has been getting dragged through a gauntlet of criticism that doesn't always make sense. Every move he makes is picked apart. Every pause in his draft process is treated like a scandal. The double standards? Astronomical. Ward called it out point blank. He didn't dance around it. He said Shedeur was facing criticism that other quarterbacks weren't, that the scrutiny wasn't always about performance. It was about perception. And you know what? He's not wrong. Let's be real. Shedeur delaying his entry into the NFL draft caused a storm of hot takes. People questioned his toughness, his decision-making, even his commitment to the game. But when other QBs make the same move, suddenly it's strategic, smart, mature. Funny how that works, right? Ward saw through it, and he said it, and not just as a teammate or a fellow QB, but as someone who's been to the grind, felt the pressure, and watched the media play favorites. He made it crystal clear. Shedeur is that guy. He's a leader, a worker, and someone who's been underestimated not because of his talent, but because of everything around it. And here's where things get deeper than just a friendly QB endorsement. Because what Cam Ward is really talking about isn't just media bias. It's the bigger picture. The way narratives are built around young athletes. The way the spotlight can become a weapon. The way expectation can smother growth. And how quickly the public will turn on you if your story doesn't fit the script they were promised. When Shedeur decided not to declare for the draft immediately, it wasn't a flinch. It was a calculated move. He knew the game. He knew the noise. And instead of letting the media timeline dictate his future, he paused. He waited. He took control. That alone, is revolutionary. And Cam respected the hell out of it, because both of them know what it's like to have to earn every ounce of credibility. They didn't come from powerhouse programs with a built-in NFL funnel. They didn't ride the hype train from high school to ESPN specials. They came from smaller schools, had to deal with scouts who saw the letters FCS and raise an eyebrow. They had to be better, sharper, more consistent, just to be in the conversation. And now that they made it, now that they've arrived in the league with real buzz and real potential, the media wants to turn them into enemies? Nah. What Cam Ward just did was rewrite the narrative. He ripped up the script. He said, you don't have to pit us against each other. You don't have to create beef for us to be interesting. You can celebrate two young quarterbacks coming up together, learning from each other, backing each other, and still being competitive. Yes, competitive. Because this isn't about holding hands and singing Kumbaya. This is about redefining what competition looks like. It's not always trash talk and side eyes and Twitter subtweets. Sometimes it's watching your friend grind in the off-season and realizing you've got to push harder. It's iron sharpening iron. It's brotherhood and ambition. And honestly, that's way more powerful than any fake feud. But maybe the most jaw-dropping part of Ward's honesty is what it reveals about the industry around them. Because this whole situation is proof of how easy it is to spin a false narrative and how damaging that can be. These are young athletes, still shaping their legacies, already having played defense against storylines they didn't write. The pressure is insane. The expectations? Even worse. And when your last name is Sanders and your dad is Dion and you dare to have a personality, buckle up. Cam didn't just defend Shedeur, the quarterback. He defended Shedeur the person, the guy behind the headlines, the one who gets reduced to Nepo baby or cocky or overhyped by people who've never seen him take a snap. And yeah, say what you want, but that kind of loyalty, it's rare, and it says a lot about both of them. Ward could have stayed silent, let the media tear Shedeur apart while he cruised on the humble rising star narrative. But he chose the harder path, telling the truth, knowing full well that honesty in this industry doesn't always win you fans. But maybe that's the real story here. Not rivalry, not drama, but two young quarterbacks rewriting the rules, refusing to be boxed in, refusing to be turned into caricatures of each other. And you know what? That deserves more attention than any fake feud ever could. So the next time you hear someone bring up Ward versus Sanders, maybe remind them it was never about one versus the other. It was always about both of them rising together, sharpening each other's game, breaking barriers, and calling out the nonsense when they see it. Because if there's one thing the NFL really needs right now, it's more players who aren't afraid to speak up and speak out. And on that note, we're giving Cam Ward the No PR Filter Award for the month for being that rare breed of athlete who doesn't just show up to play, but shows up to tell the truth. What do you think? Is the media too quick to create rivalries that don't exist? Was Shedeur right to delay his NFL entry? And who else do you think is rewriting the playbook when it comes to athlete narratives? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you love a good behind-the-scenes breakdown, and stay tuned, because if this is a new wave of NFL leadership, we're in for one hell of a season. And remember, not every battle needs a villain. Sometimes it's just two warriors on the same path, pushing each other to greatness. Oh, we're not done yet. Not even close. Because this story, this brotherhood over beef saga, it's bigger than just two quarterbacks. It's tapping into something a lot deeper in the sports world. And honestly, the world, it's about what happens when young, talented, confident athletes, especially black athletes, decide they don't want to play along with the pre-written storylines. When they decide to rewrite the narrative in their own voice, not the one crafted by talking heads in suits who've never thrown a pass or taken a hit. That's when things get messy. That's when the media starts scrambling to reframe everything. Because heaven forbid an athlete actually take control of their own journey. Let's talk about this weird obsession the public has with rivalries. The second two people are in the same arena, boom, instant enemies. Serena versus Venus, Drake versus Kendrick, Britney versus Christina, and now Ward versus Sanders? Why do we do this? Why is it so hard to imagine two people thriving together? It's because we've been fed a diet of conflict. We're taught that success is a one-lane road, and only one car can make it to the top. But the truth is, that's just lazy storytelling. And more often than not, it's a distraction, a way to ignore the real issues, like talent being overlooked, or bias creeping into analysis, or institutions refusing to evolve. Cam Ward stepping in and smashing the rivalry narrative is more than just a show of support. It's a straight-up cultural moment. He didn't just stick up for Shedeur. He exposed the whole game. He pointed to the man behind the curtain and said, "Nah, we see what you're doing." And let's be honest, he didn't have to. Cam's got his own draft buzz, his own path. He's already proven himself. And in an industry where it's every man for himself, loyalty doesn't always come easy. Speaking up for someone else, especially when it means putting yourself in the crosshairs of public opinion, that takes guts. But you know what it also takes? Trust. Trust in your own voice. Trust in your teammate. And trust that telling the truth, even when it's inconvenient, is better than playing along with the lie. This whole situation also shines a light on something even deeper: how we define greatness. Because with Shedeur, the criticism isn't just about performance. It's about style, the watches, the confidence, the media presence. People act like he's too flashy, too branded, too bold. But let's flip that for a second. Why is confidence a bad thing when it comes from someone like him? You see another quarterback wearing custom suits and doing commercials before ever throwing an NFL touchdown? He's marketable, charismatic, a future face of the league. But Shedeur does it? Suddenly he's cocky, immature, needs to focus on football. It's the same actions, just different commentary. Cam saw that double standard, and instead of staying silent, he lit it up like a stadium scoreboard. And that's the kind of allyship that can shift culture. It tells young athletes watching from the sidelines or their small-town high school gyms that they don't have to shrink to fit in, that they can own their stories, even when the media tries to rewrite them. And let's not forget the FCS piece of this. Both Ward and Sanders came from smaller programs, places that don't get primetime ESPN coverage every Saturday night. They weren't gifted the spotlight. They took it. Every touchdown, every comeback, every record-breaking moment. They had to scream a little louder just to be seen. And once they got that visibility, the first instinct wasn't celebration. It was skepticism. Yeah, but can they do it against real competition? Sure, but let's see how they handle pressure in the big leagues. The goalposts? Constantly moving. But that's what makes their bond even more powerful. They know what it's like to be overlooked, to be told, "Not yet," to be asked to prove themselves again and again, while others get crowned before even stepping on the field. It's not just mutual respect. It's mutual experience. And speaking of experience, let's talk about that draft delay again. Because Shedeur choosing to wait, that wasn't weakness. That was chess. That was him saying, "I'm not just playing the game, I'm playing my game." And that rattled people. It always does when an athlete takes the pen and starts writing their own script. But Cam, he saw that move and didn't flinch. He got it. Because sometimes the smartest play is the one where you pause, where you grow, where you build in silence while the noise tries to drown you out. There's a certain maturity in that. And Cam gave credit where it was due. Now, don't get it twisted. Both these guys still want to win. They're still competitors. This isn't some Kambaya's story where everyone holds hands and takes group selfies. They're pushing each other, watching each other, measuring progress. But it's coming from a place of respect, not resentment. It's the difference between "I want to beat you" and "I want to beat the best version of you." That's what this really is. Not enemies, equals. And in a world that's obsessed with tearing people down, that kind of dynamic, it's rare, it's precious, and it deserves to be protected. You want to know what the NFL should really be worried about? Not whether these two are rivals, but what happens when they're both at the top of their game, when they're both torching defenses and running the league from two different sidelines. Because that's not a rivalry. That's a revolution. The kind where athletes aren't just players. They're storytellers, strategists, leaders. The kind of athletes who show that success doesn't have to come at the cost of someone else's. The kind of athletes who understand that collaboration and competition aren't opposites. They're power tools when used the right way. And maybe, just maybe, this whole media manufactured mess will be a wake-up call. That instead of defaulting to drama, we start listening a little closer. That we stop trying to shove people into rivalry boxes just because it makes for a juicier segment. That we get better at recognizing nuance, brotherhood, and complexity. Because real stories, the ones that actually move us, they're not about cheap shots and forced conflicts. They're about truth and connection and the rare moments when someone steps up, calls BS, and reminds us what sports and life are actually about. So shout out to Cam Ward, the unintentional hero of this week's sports soap opera, for giving us a plot twist we didn't expect, for choosing loyalty over headlines, and for reminding everyone that behind the helmets and highlight reels, these are real people, navigating real pressures in a system that doesn't always play fair. And to Shedeur, keep doing you. Because if your growth bothers people, it's probably because they're not ready for what's coming. This isn't a rivalry story. It's a blueprint for how the next generation of athletes can rise together. Okay, now imagine this. It's 5 years from now. It's the playoffs, national spotlight, stadium roaring. Cam Ward is on one sideline, Shedeur Sanders on the other. Two elite quarterbacks, both finally getting the respect they always deserved, but had to fight way harder to earn than they ever should have. And instead of the media trying to pit them against each other with another rivalry reel, the narrative finally shifts. Suddenly it's about the journey, the loyalty, the brotherhood, the blueprint. But that kind of full circle moment, it doesn't just happen on its own. It starts here with honesty, with one of them calling out the nonsense before it calcifies into canon. Cam Ward didn't just clear the air. He set a new tone. He grabbed the mic and said, "You're not going to reduce this to a petty competition. Not on my watch." And can we just take a second to appreciate how rare that is? We live in an era where clout chasing and brand building can overshadow the actual game. Athletes are under pressure to craft viral moments, to keep their name trending, to stay visible, even when staying silent might be smarter. And yet, Cam chose a harder path. He chose to speak truth, not just drop a hot take. You know what that is? That's leadership. That's emotional intelligence. That's someone who's not just thinking about his next contract, but about how the league should work for every player coming up behind him. Because at the core of all this media manipulation is something even uglier, the idea that young black athletes are only interesting when they're fighting each other. Let's say it louder for the people in the back. This isn't just about Ward and Sanders. This is about the systemic instinct to default to conflict when it comes to black excellence. Two quarterbacks on the rise? Obviously, they must be beefing. Two elite prospects with swagger? There has to be ego drama, right? Wrong. This story breaks that trope wide open. Because what Cam revealed wasn't just a friendship, it was a strategy. These two know the game inside and out, and instead of falling into the trap, they're hacking it. Shedeur understood that delaying the draft wasn't a PR failure. It was a career investment. Time to build, to study, to prep. And Cam saw that move not as weakness, but as brilliance. Because that's what real ones do. They get it. They don't rush to judgment. They don't throw shade to elevate themselves. They stand beside the people who are walking the same fire-filled path. Let's talk about that fire for a second. Because the road to the NFL isn't just about talent. It's politics, perception, optics. Shedeur and Cam both came from schools that weren't part of the media machine. They weren't constantly in the playoff conversation. They didn't have a dozen NFL alumni to point to. And yet, they still made it. That tells you something right there. It tells you that these two didn't just break through the door. They kicked it off the hinges. And now that they're in the spotlight, every little decision they make becomes analyzed to death. Why did Shedeur delay the draft? Is Cam really QB1 material? Are they ready? You know, who doesn't get asked those questions? The quarterbacks who've been pre-approved by the system. The ones who come from legacy schools with NFL scouts built into the bleachers. For them, it's just assumed they belong. But Cam and Shedeur, They had to prove it again and again and again. And even when they do prove it, there's still that creeping doubt, that whisper campaign, that carefully worded concern about whether they're NFL ready. That's where Cam's defense of Shedeur really hits different, because it's not just one quarterback supporting another. It's one black man in a gate-kept industry, refusing to let the system chew up and spit out another rising star. And here's the real kicker. The media hates that. They hate when the players link up and start building their own narrative. They hate when the drama doesn't sell, when the supposed feud collapses under the weight of actual respect. But that's exactly why this moment matters. It's a flex, not the kind you post on Instagram, but the kind that echoes through locker rooms and agents' offices and young kids watching from their couches thinking, maybe I don't have to dim my light to succeed. Cam and Shedeur are showing a new way forward, a way where being confident doesn't mean being arrogant, where competition doesn't cancel out compassion, where you can want to be the best and still want the best of the guy next to you. And honestly, that's revolutionary. Look, sports culture is slowly evolving. We're seeing more players take control of their image, push back on toxic narratives, and build support systems that go beyond the field. But there's still so much work to do. And conversations like this, unguarded, honest, and totally not media scripted, are the spark that keeps that evolution going. The truth is, Shedeur has been treated unfairly by some parts of the media. He's been dissected more as a personality than as a player. And a lot of that scrutiny, it's got more to do with who his dad is and how he carries himself than anything happening on the field. But here's where Cam Ward's comments land like a thunderclap. He didn't just say Shedeur is getting a raw deal. He refused to let that kind of narrative go unchallenged. He basically said, "You're not going to use me to diminish him, period." And that right there, that's brotherhood. That's legacy-defining energy. Because let's face it, years from now, no one's going to care who posted what on Twitter or which segment ran the spiciest take. What people will remember, the players who rewrote the culture, the ones who weren't afraid to challenge the system and uplift their peers in real time. Cam didn't need a PR team. He didn't need a press release. He just told the truth. And in doing so, he gave fans a rare, behind-the-scenes glimpse into what actually matters in the league. Not fake beefs, not media clickbait. Respect, strategy, loyalty. It's funny, isn't it? The media worked so hard to frame this as Ward versus Sanders, and what they ended up creating was Ward plus Sanders. Two rising stars, locked in, tuned up, and fully aware of how to navigate a game that was never designed for them to win without fighting tooth and nail. So yeah, keep your fake rivalries. We'll take the real story. The one where two athletes from overlooked programs climb the ranks not by tearing each other down, but by lifting each other up. The one where success isn't a solo act, but shared journey. The one where, when the spotlight finally turned their way, they don't flinch. They shine. That's the story worth telling. That's the legacy worth building. So, if you came here for scandal, sorry, not today. What you got instead was something way more powerful, a reality check, a reset, and a reminder that sometimes the most radical thing you can do in a cutthroat industry is stand beside someone else and say, "You got this."